going to deal with a very painful subject, which is the recognition of a dead body, which has an effect for both, for the dead and for the living. The death, as we explained in the previous session, we need to have three categories, which is the face, the forehead, and the nose. We explained that Reb Chaim Brisk called that that's a necessary, otherwise we do not recognize that person in that identification. Others disagree, but the key is at least part we recognize that. The question is, what happens if is that missing? For example, someone was cut, like bareheaded, or other circumstance, burning, fire, explosion, etc. How do you go by part of the body if they don't have a doggy sign or other thing in the body? Why it's affecting both? Because the dead has an effect by recognition of the death. In modern days we do have a DNA, but again, it's not only the issue of DNA, it's much more than that. For example, if you have a plane crash and you have only ashes, how do you go about? The other part is releasing the deserted wife who needs to go ahead with her lives, and we want to make sure that they recognize the husband. So far we talk about mole on the body, special tattoo, or special ring, or special thing that people recognize that person, and we ask those questions. Let me share with you first the Rambam, and then we go to the text itself of the Gemara. I'm showing with you some from the, this is the Gemarrah in English of Koren, that give us, it's Rabbi Steinsaltz basically, that gives us the view of the Rambam. First is the Rambam, Ilchot Gerushim, chapter 13, it's also Shulchan Aruch, Even Ezer 17. If one find a corpse, meaning you find a dead body corpse, and the countenance of the face, nose, and forehead are intact. So, and he recognizes the corpse as a particular person based on those features. He may testify this person as died. Yet, we explained in the previous session that seeing someone about to die, God forbid if he's a slaughtering by animal, but he's not dead yet, if it was a fire or any other, God forbid, incidents, one may not testify that a person has died unless he or she sees that person's corpse. Meaning, for example, the doctor checked the pulse and declared death. So if one sees someone crucified with birds eating the flesh, God forbid, or stabbed and shot his arrows, but the individual is not yet fully dead, he may not testify that the individual has died. So we ask a question about the 3 days period that the Mishnah tells us. So that's basically Shulchan Aruch, Even Ezer 17, but also this Rambam. It says one may testify that another individual has died based on visual identification only if one saw the corpse within 3 days of the person's death. If one saw the corpse after that time, he may not testify about the identity of the dead individual, as the appearance of the body change after death, as we explained in the previous session, the whole process of decomposition. I can tell you in my 19 years in rabbinate in this country that it happens many times. I just told you in the story with the guy from New Zealand that came here for the, what is called, boat competition? Yeah, regatta. Yes, and they found him dead, they brought him to the hospital, they brought him to funeral home, and the whole process took place several days. So it was close to impossible to identify by the facial. You identify the tattoo, you identify the other things in the body, but facial, that's the issue as we explained earlier. The Brisker Rav have a big issue if you don't have the three very basic items, which is the cheeks, the forehead, and the nose. We go further and we say that when it's come to simanim, if you talk about a distinguishing mark, we differentiate between the Oraita and the Rabbanan, and this is the Rambam, Ilchot Evdah, chapter 13. He said, according to a Torah law, one may rely upon unusual distinguished marks and make legal decisions based on them. The Kesef Mishneh, one of the commentators on the Rambam, said that one may return lost object based upon their identification via unusual distinguishing marks. and one may allow the wife of the dead man to remarry only if the man is identified via externally unusual identification marks. Marks that are less unusual may not be relied upon at all. So you see here that only what's called in halacha siman muv'ak. Siman muv'ak, that it's absolutely clear. So here is our subject. We are now on page 121 at the Mishnah, and the first subject is the issue of water, meaning this is the Rambam Ilchot Kiyaushin, chapter 13. It tells us if someone drowned in water, and the water swept him up onto the dry land, so those who recognize him may testify to his death, even several days after drowning. The question is, as we explained in the previous session, imagine, God forbid, it should never happen to anyone, you're riding the boat in an area that there are sharks, for example. There's somebody run to the water, just want to have fun and, for example, want to do some diving. And he is somehow connected with the rope. And you pull back the rope and it's only leg. And we explained that it can be, it sounds awkward, but it can be that part of his leg was cut. And he somehow heal, somehow escape, somehow go elsewhere. And we differentiate between the leg, if it's passing the knee or not, by halakha. And basically what we said, if it's not passing the knee, we still have a suspicion that he may be alive, which for sure not only affect the issue of the declaration of his demise, but also the issue of releasing his wife to go ahead and marry. So here's the Mishnah 121. Nafal hamayim. Someone fell into the water and did not come out. Ben sheyesh lahem sof, ben she'en lahem sof. Meaning, there is an area, we call it maybe the little river or little bay, that we see all the four corners is like large pool, that we know that there is an end, is no pipe or is no area that goes out of that domain. Mayim she'en lahem sof, water that is no end, is like typical situation. For example, our bay have a continuation to the ocean. So when you talk about the end does not leave a visible end, here you have Isho Ishtu Asura. We said that his wife is prohibited from remarrying. So there is no absolute proof that the man died, and it is possible that he emerged from the water some distance away. So that's the point of view of Rabbi Meir. So even you have a witness that come in and said that I don't see him from any place coming out of the water, it still follow the idea of which we study several times in Rabbi Akiva, that the water is not ended and it leads to an ocean. So since that is a possibility, we cannot release her. Amar Rabbi Meir, this is a very painful story. Rabbi Meir tells us, Ma'aseh be'echad shenafal leבור gadol. It was a fellow incident that involving certain person who fell into the great cistern. Ve'ala le'achar shlosha yamim. How do you like that? And emerged only after 3 days. So it is an evident that sometimes one may survive a fall into water even when everyone assumes he is dead. Next step. Again, you ask me how that can be many things. Can be, for example, he jump out of the water and breathe and nobody sees him and he comes back. It can be a lot of how that happened. The Aruch LaNer deal with that, or all kind of circumstances that it can be possible. I'm not using the story of Jonah that survived miraculously in the big Leviathan, big fish, whatever it is. We talk about the situation that's possible, and it's not Hollywood, it's something that can happen. However, there is Rabbi Yossi that disputed. Amar Rabbi Yossi, Maseh besuma shi'arad lidbol b'mara. It was a blind person that went and he dug himself immerse himself in a cave. For example, if you go to Tzfat, you see the Rizal. It's almost like a cave, the mikveh, right? The ritual bath. V'yarad moshcho acharav. So it turns that his guide descended after him, and they disappear there. ושהו כדי שתתר נפשם. And they remained there long enough for the souls to have departed. So the Mishnah doesn't tell us how long it is. Is that 2 minutes or 6 minutes? Later, הסיעו את נשותיהם. Since the body did not come out, so the sages have chazakah, have an assumption that they are dead, and they allow the wives to marry. So here you see an example that you have a water that is no-ended, like this water in the cave, and the people there did not see in a certain normal frame of time, let's say, let's exaggerate, said 5-6 minutes maybe. I remember I saw once years back, 30 years ago maybe, the training of the Israeli Navy SEALs. It's called Commando. So one of their trainings, they throw in the ocean in a certain domain like 12 rings, and they ask the trainers to jump to the water and pick them up in a certain time. So they basically want to measure the potential fighters, potential soldiers, how long they survive under the water without a mask, without anything, and pick up those 12 pieces from down below. So it's the measurement, let's exaggerate and said 6 minutes or so. So people stand there for that period of time, and it's past that time. So the assumption is, even you don't see the body, in this case, that they are dead, and therefore they allow them to marry. So here you see a disputation between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Meir, because basically, according to Rabbi Yossi, even in the situation when it's a mayim she'en lahem sof, which means that you have a water that is no-ended, which lead to an ocean, Rabbi Meir said that it's a possibility that a person survive. Rabbi Yossi said it cannot. Anyway, ושוב מעשה בעשייה באחד ששלשלו לים ולא עלתה בידם אלא רגלו. As we said, it's a very painful story. It happened in the Asia. I don't know if that Asia or other place, but anyway, they lower a certain man into a sea on a rope, and when they pulled the rope back to land, only the leg came up in their hands, and they were not certain whether he was alive or dead. You go to the Bermuda, right, triangle, or you go to certain places in the water, is the tumultuous turmoil under the water, and between wild fish to other things can happen for all kind of reasons. ואמרו, וחכמים, the sages אמרו, they said, מנהר קובאו למעלה תינשא, מנהר קובאו למטה לא תינשא. The rabbi said that it all depends how you treat it. It's like the Gemarrah in Chulin 76 said, well, how you consider something treif. So the assumption is how a person can survive under this excruciating pain or terrible circumstance. So the idea is, if it's below the knee, we differentiate between if his leg cut only from the knee and below, so she may not marry, because again, we have even a small, statistically very small possibility that it's so. Let me show it you Rashi. Rashi tells us that that cut of the leg below the knee doesn't make the animal treifa in comparison to human, so therefore she cannot remarry, because maybe he can escape without people seeing him from the water in different location, since the water is endless, and therefore he may heal and he is alive. Tanu Rabbanan, nafal hamayim. This is one view. If a person fall to the water, ben sheyesh lahem sof, ben she'en lahem sof, ishto asura dibra. Rabbi said, come on, his wife is prohibited, because regardless if the water is ended or not ended, as long as you don't find him and you don't see any evidence, you cannot release her. By the way, after the Israeli traumatized with the Dakar submarine at the early 70s, when you have like, if I'm not mistaken, 70-some sailors that sank with the submarine, and many of them are young wives that stuck in the unknown situation, it's a deserted one. Many chaplains require, at least in the IDF, for soldiers who go to special mission to leave a get in advance. So in case in a certain situation like that, there is an easy way for the wives to go ahead in their lives and not stuck forever, especially those who want to have children and more. והחכמים אומרים, מים שיש להם סוף אשתו מותרת, אין להם סוף אשתו אסורה. The sages have a different view, they match the view of Rabbi Yossi in the Mishnah. They said you have to differentiate between water that is the end, water the end is no end. So they said if he fell into a body of water with a visible end, so his wife is permitted to marry, but if he fell into a body of water with no end, his wife is prohibited from marrying. So now the Gemarrah dealt with that. It said, give me exactly the circumstances defining a body of water with a visible end. אמר רביי, כל שעומד ורואה מארבע רוחותיו. If you see someone who stands in that place and can see the shore in all four directions, is considered water with a visible end. Since anyone emerging from the water will be seen. But on the contrary, if the body of water is so large that it is totally impossible to see its shore at all sides, so the individual may have emerged in a place where he could not be seen by other people, standing there, and he fell in. So here is the story. It was a person that drawn into a lake in a place called Samkei. So Rav Sheila allowed his wife to marry based on the testimony of witnesses who saw he entered the water and did not emerge. Here you see a contradiction, because basically we said that you need to see the passing to the final stage, and now all of a sudden he said just by seeing get in the water and drown, that was sufficient. So therefore, Amar le Rav le Shmuel, Tanish Matei. Rav was so mad at him, he said to Shmuel, come and let us excommunicating him for having issued this ruling. Amar le, Shmuel responded to him and said to him, Nishlach le bereisha. You know what, let us send someone, emissary, a messenger, and clarified whether he had a sufficient reason to issue his ruling, which is so show you the rabbi's behavior. You don't just punish someone, you want to have a clarification what exactly happened, at least from his view. So they purposely sent him a specific question. When a man disappears in the endless body of water, is his wife forbidden or permitted woman? Meaning, can she remarry or not? Shalach lehu ishto asura. He said no. He said, then respond, he said, if he's in endless water, his wife is prohibited from marriage. So therefore, v'agma de samkei, maim shesh lahem sof or en lahem sof. So they told him, okay, how about that lake, the lake of Samkei? Is that considering a body of water with a visible end, or an endless body of water? You see how serious, effective this halachic decisions of the rabbis is really affecting the future of people and sometimes families for generation. Shalach lehu maim she'en lahem sofu. He said, that specific lake I hold that it's an endless body of water, since one cannot see the water's edge on every side. So then they ask him, if that's the case, so if that's the case, how come that you, meaning Rav Sheila, the master, acts this way, allowing his wife to remarry? So he responded, listen to this. He said, Mit'a ta'ina. He said, I made a mistake, I erred in my reasoning. Ana savrei kevan dekavu vekaimei kemaim sheyesh lahem sof dame. I thought, you see the rabbis are also human, I thought that since the waters are gathered and standing and not flowing like a river, they are considered a body of water with a visible end. But he said, "Velohi kevandi kagale emor gale ashpelu." But the truth is, he said, that this is not so, since there are waves in a body of water. Say that the waves carries him away from our side, allow him to emerge without being seen. Karei Shmuel alei de Rav. So, in light of this response, Shmuel, the great rabbi, great sage, recited this verse. It's from the book of Proverbs, Mishlei, chapter 12. Lo ye'uneh latzadik kol avel. No mischief shall befall to the righteous. Why? Because it was a righteous Rav. that waited and did not excommunicate Rav Shila, he was prevented from causing him injustice, because Rav Shila had been mistaken, and he had not, for sure, intentionally violated the decree of the sages prohibiting the woman from remarrying on the basis of her husband having disappeared into an endless body of water. קרא עלי רב עלי דשמואל ותשועה ברוב יועץ. So in response, Rav recited the verse from Proverbs 11 to Shmuel. He said, but salvation lies much counsel, which means since it was Shmuel advised that caused Rav to wait and not to be impetuous in that decision. So it's a lot to learn from here. Not only the humbleness of Rav Shila, but also the way that you rule something. Tanya, אמר רבי, מעשה בשני בני אדם מחמרים מחמורים בירדן. It was a painful story of two people, incidents involving that they are fishing with nets on the Jordan River. ונכנס אחד מהם למחילה של דגים. And one of them entered a cave containing a pond of fish next to the shore. ושקעה חמה ולא ראה פתחה של מחילה. And unfortunately, meanwhile, the sun set, and the one who had entered the cave could not see the cave's opening and did not exit. So his friend thought that he is drowned. ושהה חברו כדי שתצא נפשו. His friend waited long enough for his soul to have departed. ובא והודיע בתוך ביתו. So he came and notified the man's household that he is drowned. למחר זרחה חמה. The following day the sun rose. והכיר פתחה של מחילה. And the man in the cave recognized the opening of the cave and exit through it. ובא ומצא הספד גדול בתוך ביתו. So and he came and he found profuse eulogizing in his house. אמר רבי, כמה גדולים דיבר חכמים. רבי יהודה הנשיא said, how great is the word of our sages. שאמרו מים שיש להם סוף אשתו מותרת, מה שאין להם סוף אשתו אסורה. They said if a man fell into a body of water with a visible end, his wife is permitted to marry. But if in the case the water is no end, the wife is prohibited from marrying. So the Gemara said, "Hachei, מים שיש להם סוף, נמי ליחוש למחילה של דגים." So if that's the case, if you have a body of water that it's with a visible end, so we should be concerned about a cave containing a pond of fish. So, because in that case of that individual, he did not emerge for a long period of time. So it's possible that he entered a cave and still alive. So they said, "B'mayim sheyesh lahem sof mechila shel dagim lo shchicha." He said, "Come on, when it's come to this, it's so rare to find a cave containing a pond of fish. Is not common in the body of water with a visible end." Amar Rav Ashi commented on, and he said, "Hade amru Rabbanan." What the sages said, "Mayim she'en lahem sof ishto asura." What they said that if the endless body of water, his wife is prohibited from remarrying. Hanemile beinish de alma. It applies to a regular, ordinary person who is not well known and could slip away secretly and live in anonymity, hiding from the fact that he survived. אבל צומא דרבנן, על תור הסקאלה, because everyone supposed to know him or know him. So they said, לא, אידס לי קלה איתלי ולא היא. So basically, if the publicity will be generated from the news that his survival will spread. So the Gemara rejected and said, no, it's not so. לא שנה יידיש דעלמא ולא שנה צומא דרבנן. There's no difference between Torah scholar and a lay person. Diavad in lechatchila lo. After the fact, if she remarried, yes, she may remain with her new husband, but if she come and ask in advance, she may not remarry lechatchila. Tanya אמר רבן גמליאל, פעם אחת נהלך בספינה וראיתי ספינה אחת שנשברה. רבן גמליאל, the great rabbi, said at one time, I was traveling on a boat, and from a distance I saw a boat that was shattered and sank. והייתי מצטער על תלמיד חכם שבא, and I know that he's a Torah scholar there, so I was grieved over the apparent death of a Torah scholar who was on the board. Umanu Rabbi Akiva, and it was Rabbi Akiva. וכשעליתי ליבשה, בא וישב ודן לפני בהלכה. And when I was disembarked into the land, dry land, All of a sudden he came, he sat, and delivered before me about halacha. אמרתי לו, בני מי יהיה לך? He said to him, my son, who brought you up from the water? So he said, אמר לי, דף של ספינה נזדמן לי. He said, the plank from the boat came to me. וכל גל וגל שבא אליי נענעתי לו ראשי. And I bent my head before each and every wave that came toward me. So the waves did not wash me off of the board, and I reached the shore. מכאן אמרו חכמים, from here the sages said, אם יבואו רשעים על אדם, ינענע לו ראשו. This derives another idea that says that if the wicked person, people come upon the person, he should bend his head before them, which means he should temporarily restrain himself and not fight them, and with thereof be safe, because sometimes it's a waste of time. And then he said, אמרתי באותה שעה, he said at that time, that moment, he said, כמה גדולים וחכמים, how great is the word of the sages, שאמרו מים שיש להם סוף, מותרת מה שאין להם סוף אסורה. That again, they said if the water has a visible end, the wife is allowed to marry it, otherwise not. תניא אמר רבי עקיבא, פעם אחת אם נלך בספינה, וראיתי ספינה אחת שמתערבת בים. רבי עקיבא said, similar story in different avenue. He said that I was traveling on a boat, and all of a sudden I saw a certain boat sinking at the sea. והייתי מצטער תלמיד חכם שבאו מנו רב מאיר, and I was very sorry, grief about the apparent death of one of the scholars, which was Rabbi מאיר. כשעליתי למדילת קפוטקיה, בא וישב ודן לפני בהלכה, and all of a sudden when I came out, the place called Kaputkia, he came, we have a halachic discussion, etc. אמר לו, בני מי יהיה לך? Ask him, my son, who brought you here? So he said, אמר לי, גל טרדני לחברו, וחברו לחברו עד שהגענו ליבשה. He said to me, one wave carried me to another, and another wave, etc. That other waves to another until I reached the shore, and the wave cast me up onto the dry land. עד שהגיענו ליבשה. אמרתי ברשעה, כמה גדולים דברי חכמים, how great is the word of the sages. מים שאין להם סוף אשתו אסורה. מים שיש להם סוף אשתו. Again, the same mindset, that if you have an endless water, so the wife is allowed, otherwise not. תנו רבנן. So the sages ask a question, what happened? נפל לגוב אריות. Individual fell into the lion's death. So the question is, if that's the case, אין מעידים עליו. So one may not testify about him that he died, since the lions might not have killed him. So Daniel. Again, you know the famous story of Daniel, yeah. Right? So he said, לחפורה מלאה נחשים ועקרבים, like story of Joseph, right. That he ended up into a pit filled with snakes and scorpions. So they said, מעידים עליו. So then they can take a testimony, and the one may testified about his death, since it's certain that they will kill him. רבי יהודה מבטר אומר, אף לחפורה מעל הנחשים הקרבים אין מעידים עליו. Even, he said, if he fell into a pit full of snakes and scorpions, one may not testify about him that he died, because we are concerned. 121b, Shema Chabarhu, mean maybe he is a charmer, which means he know how to put together snakes and scorpions, who know magic and some idea how to put them together. Those days, as Gemara said in Sanhedrin 65, based on the Torah, in Deuteronomy 28, we should not have people like that do that. But here we allow, because the issue of saving life, pikuach nefesh. The Tana Kama, and the first Tana holds that we don't need to concern about this possibility. Why? Agav itzitza mazkelei. Due to the pressure of his body falling on the top of them, they will harm him. Which means even if he could control them under other circumstances. תנו רבנן, נפל לתוך כבשן האש, מעידים עליו. This is very interesting, because here we said that if one fell into a blazing furnace, one may testify about him that he has died. So here we have a machloket, a disputation between Bavli and Yerushalmi. Bavli is the Babylon Talmud, Yerushalmi is the Jerusalem Talmud. What is it? First, let's understand the situation. Here you have an issue with her, meaning his wife, that she's considering a married woman. You want her to be released and go out, date, married, etc. She is under the category of biblical issue, which is eshet ish, a married wife. The question is, when you use the term ra'uhu, meaning people see him, what do you mean by that? Just literally speaking, is you see a man that get into a blazing furnace. But if you look carefully, they use the word nafal, meaning fell. What does that mean, fell? So according to the Rashba and the Ritva, this is the rabbis in the Rishonim, in the early stages, those who hold that it was a huge cistern, huge pit in the ground, and fire came from that pit. Now, they saw him fell into that, and the smoke coming. So it means that his feet, his bottom part of his body was shrinking from the fire. Okay? So therefore, you can marry his wife by those witnesses that saw him fell in that pit that was burning pit. Even, listen carefully, you did not see him passing. Because what we said yesterday and day before yesterday, that we are very hard, very strict that with the witnesses, with those who have a cross-examination, to make sure that they see the passing. Extreme example is if you see a wild animal eating him, but those moments he was still breathing, you're not considering him, their witness say, valid, because it wasn't the final stage. Now, here is the interesting part. If he jumped into a furnace, meaning burning furnace, according to Rashi, Rashba, Ritva, that's not sufficient to release her. Why? Because he may escape. We all remember the story of Daniel, that in the book of Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, it was a three great leader that was forced by the Babylon king Nebuchadnezzar to jump into the fire, and they survived. So for sure it was a miracle, etc. The only way we're accepting that if the witness stay there, the two witnesses stay there, and they saw him burning in the fire.
Wasn't it a fiery pit also that Abraham was
one of the story about
Kastim?
Yes, so there's one midrash that said that Nimrod threw him into a furnace.
Right.
Another midrash said that he fell into a pit that was burning. Right?
But it was a burning.
תוספות, דיבור המתחיל אין מזכירים, נציג ירושלמי, that said that if he fell to a lion den, for example, so you can't take their witness, because it's the same as happened to Daniel in chapter 6. The same as Daniel chapter 3, that he may fell into the furnace, burning furnace, and he survived. So, meaning, according to this Yerushalmi, because we are so concerned about the prohibition of married women, we also concerned about the possibility that he survived above nature with that, in order to save him from relation with married women. According to the Bavli, the way that we understand the pshat in the regular Gemarrah, Babylon Talmud, we're not concerned about this far-fetched Maaseh Nisim, a miracle that happened. Because even is the smallest chance that he survived, he went to the fire and he survived, like you see in the movies, right? So you take it as a possibility and you not release her. So therefore, only if you see the furnace in a level or the cistern or that is no way, the expert tells you that no one can escape and it's over, so then, for example, take a lion den. You may say that the lion was not hungry. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Possible, right?
Absolutely. No, I mean, you can get out of a lion's den without a miracle, but getting out of a furnace without a miracle may be a little more difficult.
They said about Nebuchadnezzar that when he threw people to a lion den, the lion was so hungry that while people are in the air,
they were grabbing him, yeah.
They grab them and eat them. That's a Tosfot and Keren Ora and Aruch Laner and others. Anyway, so they said, Le'yora, mele'a yain v'shemen meidim alav. If you see him fell into a boiling cauldron filled with wine or oil, wine men also testified about him that he has died. משום רבי אחא אמרו של שמן מעידים עליו מפני שהוא מבעיר. If it was an oil, so it can get more. It's not stop. The burning oil is going stronger and stronger. של יין אין מעידים עליו. If it's a wine, field of wine, it's like a barrel, say not. Why? מפני שהוא מכבה. Because what happened is one may the wine splashes into a fire and extinguishes the fire. אמרו לו, the sages said to him, תחילתו מכבה. It is true that at the very beginning of the process it can extinguishes the wine. וסופו מבעיר. The truth is, at the end, it's going higher and stronger. So Rashi said that even in a case of a field of wine, we assume that he's dead. Amar Rabbi Meir, we learn in the Mishnah, Rabbi Meir said, מעשה באחד שנפל לבור הגדול. This is a story about incidents that occurred involving a certain individual who fell into a great cistern and emerged after 3 days. So, just to refresh our memory, we explained that there is a definition, very important definition, an identification of death when it's involved with water. We differentiate between a place like the bay, like the ocean, that it's going everywhere. You do not see the four corners. It's called, in the language of the Gemara, mayim she'ein lahem sof. You don't see the end part of the water. So Rabbi Meir holds that even if the husband disappears in the water, that you see the end, and not just that, the witness also was there until the very last moment before he totally demise, you still cannot say that he's dead, and his wife still cannot get married. Rabbi Yossi, which is the majority of the sages, hold and disagree. So Rabbi Meir brought this exceptionally unique, different case in this water field of cistern to prove that here is a guy, after 3 days he survived. So here we bring a braita, a quote of the sages that respond to that story of Rabbi Meir in the Mishnah. Tanya, אמרו לו לרבי מאיר, the sages said to Rabbi Meir, אין מזכירים מעשה ניסים. Come on, you cannot bring a final halacha. Remember when we studied Tanu Rosh Lachinai, the disputation between Rabbi Yoshua and Rabbi Eliezer, and he tried to bring proof from heaven? He says that's not the way we paskin halacha. It's not the way that we rule halachic manner. So even according to your view, that it's not necessarily true that the person in the water at a certain period of time that he is dead, but naturally speaking, he must probably die in a different way. Soon we show example. So therefore, you must say that this is a miracle, a exceptionally different circumstance. So therefore, you cannot prove from this story that the average person can survive in a natural way of water more than the regular measurement of time. My ma'aseh nisim. Tell me, what do you mean by saying it's a matter of miracle? If you tell me de lo achil velo ishtei, meaning the Aruch said that the water was not befitting, it wasn't a drinking water. So you're talking about limitation of human, that 3 days he not ate or drink. Ve'aktiv, do you remember the quote from the book of Esther, chapter 4? She asked the Jewish people, the entire community worldwide, to do what? To fast 3 days, ve'tzumu alai, ve'al tochlu, ve'al tishtu, shloshet yamim, laila v'yom. She asked Mordechai to instruct the Jewish people not to eat or drink for 3 days. By the way, you know that the fast of Tanit Esther, it's not a fast that the Jewish people fast originally in Shushan or worldwide. It was the only Pesach recorded in Jewish history that the Jewish people, instead of celebrating the Seder, they fast for 3 days and 3 nights worldwide. What we're doing in the 13th of Adar is a reflection, is a commemoration, is the 11 months that passed from that moment, but the fast itself took place on Pesach. Anyway, so it was 3 days. In the 14, 15, and 16 of Nisan, that's famous Rashi in Tractate Megillah, page 15, and also in the book of Esther, chapter 4, verse 17. So Esther depend upon the miracle that evil decree will change, right? The fast was, I'm sorry, it wasn't worldwide for that, it was just for the people in Shushan. Anyway, so sure, even according to general worldwide manner, a person can survive 3 days without drinking and eating. So the miracle with the story of Rabbi Meir, the lo nayem, he did not sleep for 3 days. No, Gilbert, is that possibility? People cannot sleep 3 days?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So they said, Omar Rabbi Yochanan, שבועה שלא אישן 3 ימים מלקין אותו. If someone take an oath, I will not sleep for 3 days, you give him malkot. Why? Because it's called taking oath in vain. Ve'ishan le'alta. So it has to be a miracle. Rabbi Meir, my tama. Why he hold that it's not a miracle? Amar Rav Kahana, kipin al kipin hayu. Rav Kahana hold that there were several levels of arches built on top of other arches within the great cistern, and he supported himself on the arches and slept. Rabbi Meir, so how Rabbi Meir respond to that? He ifshar delo misrich v'nayem puta. And Rabbi Meir assumed that it is inconceivable that he did not grasp some part of an arch for a short time and sleep a little, and therefore this incident does not qualify as a miracle. So again, therefore you cannot release. תנו רבנן, מעשה בביתו של נחוניה וחופר שיחים. This is the famous Nechonia, that he was a well digger for the those who fulfill the mitzvah of ayon, which means the pilgrims that comes 3 times to the temple. So he makes sure that it's a collection of a rainwater, so those people have enough water for themselves and the animals. So he was very erudite in a way to keep the water in a certain way. That's a Mishnah in Tractate Shkalim, chapter 5. So Shenafla leBor Gadol. So while the daddy, the father, that's the Tosfot tells us, he was doing that, and unfortunately his daughter fell to that large cistern. ובאו והודיעו לרבי חיי בן דוסר. רבי חיי בן דוסר is a very famous one that involved with creating miracles, right? שעה ראשונה אמר להם שלום. The first hour he said, since it's a possibility for her to survive, so he said it's peace upon her. שנייה אמר להם שלום. The second is still all that she can survive. שלישית אמר להם עלתה. The third one, after the 3 hours, that's the way that by the nature she most probably will sing. So he declared that she came, because he figured out that shomer mitzvah lo yeda davar ra, that this righteous man, his daughter will come out, and it happens. So they pull her out of that big cistern, and they brought her before Rabbi Hanina. Amar la biti mi elach, who is the one who pulled you out of the cistern of the pit? Amar lo zachar shel rechilim nizdamen li, vezaken manhigo. She said she saw a male that old man leading, that a ram, and he came out, and that's the way that they took it. That's a reflection of the story of Isaac, that with the Akedah. Amru lo navi ata, are you a prophet that you prognosticated what's going to happen? Amar lehem lo navi anochi velo ben navi anochi. No, I'm not a prophet, I'm not son of a prophet, but אלא הדבר שהצדיק מתעסק בו, ייכשל בו זרעו. You can't tell me that endeavor that the righteous man like Nechunya is engaged, which is digging for the benefit of the community, his offspring will not stumbling upon its fruit and thereby be killed. So I knew that Hashem will certainly save her. Amar Rabbi Abba, Af al pichem, even though Nechunya made an arduous effort to help those who are pilgrim, met bno batzama. Unfortunately, his son died of thirst. Why? So they said, Shene'emar, they said in Tehillim, in Psalm 50, Usvivav nish'ara me'od. And around God is storms, mighty storms. Melamed she'akadosh baruch hu medakdek im svivav kechud asara. That's a hard concept. That the Almighty have the highest expectations from the righteous. So therefore, the punishment that righteous receive, it's so hard and strict, way more than an average lay person, which is a very deep and hard concept in the hashkafa, in the manner of thinking. Like some say that it was part of cleansing of his sins in this world. It's a lot of interpretation. Rabbi Hanina Amar Mehacha. There's another pasuk, but the same meaning. Kel na'aratz besod doshim rabba, venora al kol svivav, which is again according to Rashi over there in that pasuk in Tehillim 89, that God is very strict. It is most feared by those who are nearest to Him, which is the righteous, because God is more, hard on them. Mishnah. So now we bring some leniency when it's come to a passing of a husband. אפילו שמע מן הנשים אומרות מת שהיא פלוני. How do you say it? Yentestov. You see a few ladies sitting there and chatting, right? Did you ever see that? Okay. So the person standing there, and he heard them speaking, this guy is dead. Now, they don't meant to give a testimony, they're just chatting, right? Dayo, that's enough to come and give a testimony. So you ask a question, the Mishnah in Sanhedrin 29 said that you cannot bring a witness from another witness. It's like hearsay. But again and again and again, you see when it's come to release deserted wife, we can go even that far. Why? It's a concept in halacha that's called mesiach lefi tumo. If someone just speaking quote-unquote innocently. And since those ladies who talk among themselves, so it's that, follow that concept. רבי יהודה אומר, אפילו שמע מן התינוקות אומרים, הרי אנו הולכים לספוד ולקבור את איש פלוני. So he said not only a group of ladies talking, but even he heard a group of children who were chatting, and they said, we are going to give a eulogy and bury certain person that is dead. So even you hear that it's not considering bnei da'at, he said, because they are, kids. Here it's different. You're accepting that. So it's extreme leniency. בין שהוא מתכוון, ובין מתכוון, regardless if that person intended to give a witness of the passing of the husband, and therefore he used it as a part of the testimony, or if he is not intent for that part, but just משיח לפי תומו, is just speaking. רבי יהודה בן בבא אומר, בישראל, he said in the case of a regular fellow Jew that come and give a witness of the passing of the husband, you accepting his word, אף על פי שהוא מתכוון, even he intended to give it a witness. And what's the problem you have with that? Because you always ask the motive. Is him or someone intend to have her? Why exactly he has a motivation to do it, right? We have a discussion later. ובעובד כוכבים, an idolater that he declared before our court that fellow is dead, אם היה מתכוון, אין לדעתו עדות. But if this fellow, his testimony is intended to testify, his statement is relied upon only when he does not intend. But if he is intent, so then you cannot consider that as a valid testimony, because you have to figure out what exactly he have in his intent. Maybe it's a different motive that is not correct. Okay. Mishnah tells us that if someone heard from the little children, we are going to partake of the eulogy and bury of someone, he can come before the Bet Din and he give a witness that the fellow is dead, and we accept him. So the Gemara asks, "V'dilma lo azli." Maybe should we be concerned that they're talking about it, but they not even go there, and it may be a total mistake. So Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, deka'amrei. No, the other way around. That they said, these young children said with each other, "Harenu ba'in milispod u'milikvor et ish ploni," which means they are talking about past, that we came after we participate of the funeral. So the Tosfot explained that it was just a abbreviation, a succinct of that statement, that we just returned from that. So the Rema in Even HaEzer 17, he said that this has to be specifically a conversation among those young children that happened just before that. Meaning, we don't accept something that happened long ago. Trumat HaDeshen also said the same, that they can go by something that they talk about the past because they can mix it up. If they said it just happened, V'dilma kamtza be'alma shchivlei ve'asiku le'al shmei. Maybe it was just a little animal, a grasshopper, with which they played, and they die, and these children named that grasshopper after that person, Ve'asiku le'al shmei. So how do you know that that's the way the kids playing, right? So the Ka'amrei, that's the way the children said, Ken v'chen Rabbanan havu atam, Ken v'chen Safdanei havu atam. Meaning, it's not just that, they mention all the names of the rabbis that attended, the people who does eulogy that attended, so they go to all those details in conversation, so we assume that it's involved with a real evidence of a real story. The Rambam, and also in Even HaEzer, Shulchan Aruch 17, he said that since we have the issue of Ktanim the minors are not barei dat, are not capable of giving final witness, so he said in the final halacha you cannot accepting them. Only if they bring some strong evidence that prove it. So in short, it's a machloket, how far you go with the testimony that come from children.
That reminds me of a story that you told me once.
About
you.
Me, what?
About saying Kaddish for the, remember the one time when you were very
Oh, that's funny. You know that story?
That's a great example of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know the story?
I remember, but you should.
I was a kid, I was 4 maybe? 3 or 4 years old. So I used to go with my father to shul every day.
Mm-hmm.
So one day my parents caught me standing wearing talit at the front of the mirror, either 3 or 3.5 or 4 years old or something like that. You have to ask my mom. And saying Kaddish at the front of the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
So mom came and said, why are you saying Kaddish? So I said, it's a guy in a shul that used to give me ice cream and candies. His name is Nachum. And he used to come every day. He didn't show up this morning.
Mm.
So I'm saying it for him.
See, it's a good example of how children will do that, see?
No,
Now you can't take that as witness.
Anyway, ובעובד כוכבים, that he said that this fellow passed, אם היה מתכוון, if he intends to say as a witness, so we don't accept him. אמר רב יהודה אמר שמואל, לא שנו אלא שנתכוון להתיר. This applies specifically if the intent is to permit the woman to remarry. Aval, so meaning if he has an intent, I have compassion on her, and that's the reason he does that. But if it's nitkaven lehaid, intent to testify about the man's death, in a way nothing to do with her, eduto edut, his testimony considered as a valid testimony. Heiche yadinan. So, how do you know, because here we're talking about idolater, so how do you know what is his sincere intent? You have an issue of trust of this guy, you know, he's an idol worshipper. אמר רב יוסף, בא לבית דין ואמר, איש פלוני מת, הסיעו את אשתו. This guy is, it's not really a moron, but he doesn't know all the rules. So he come before the beit din, this idolater, and he says, hey, this fellow, Yosef, he's dead. So rabbis, you should marry his wife. Make sure that his wife get married. זהו נתכוון להתיר. Because he just telling us what is his idea, motivation, right? He wants to release her. So he cannot accept that. מת סתם, if he just come and tells us that the fellow is dead, זהו נתכוון לעדות. But he intend to give a witness. Itma nami. Amar Reish Lakish lo shanu. The Mishnah said that intent of edut from idolater, that the husband is dead, is not accepted. Ela shenitkaven lehatir, when he intended to what? To release the wife to get married. Aval nitkaven lehaid, if he only intended to give a witness and not to release the wife, eduto edut. Amar le Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan disputed his relative, Reish Lakish, and he said, לא כך היה מעשה בהושעיה ברבי. This is a story about a great rabbi. Rebbe is a honorable title. It's like Marayan Eruv in 53. So he said here, שהתריס עם 85 זקנים, that meaning that he disputed 85 elders, erudite elders, in a manner of Torah, and that's the manner of Baalei Trisim. If you remember, we studied it in Bchorot 36. So they said, אמר להם, לא שנו, אלא שנתכוון להעיד. That's apply only if he intended to do what? To give a witness to release the wife from getting married. אבל נתכוון להעיד, עדותו עדות. So that's, ולא הודו לו חכמים. The sage says you can't do that. The majority of the sages said he cannot. So even he intended to just give a testimony, and he's not intended to release the woman, even in that case, because of his background, you can accept him that. And we go always by the vote of the majority. And the majority of the sages said no. So Ela matnitin de katanu be'oved kochavim. So how come this conflicted with the Mishnah that said that the idol worshipper you accepting sometimes? Im haya mitkaven eidut toedut echem hashkachat la, if he intended to release her, so his matter of witness is not give me a situation like that. So he said, "B'mesiach lefi tumo." You have to say that this fellow is just talking in a manner of he's not intended to he's just talking, and you see the manner that he speaks, that it's he talk about the passing of that man, not that he come before the court and give a witness. He's just talking, and while he's talking, you get it. Ki hahu is the story of fellow that was not Jewish. The Havaka Amar Ba'azil, he was talking while he was traveling from one place to another. Man ika beichivai, ma ika beichivai, which means is anybody from that family beichivai. So meaning he intended to tell the family chivai of the passing, but since he is not coming before the rabbinic court, he's just going to that family to tell them. And it's not said as a response to a question that people asking. Mm-hmm. So that's considering Masiach lefi tumo, that he's just talking naturally. Shchiv chivai, that person, I want to know where are his family, chivai, because that fellow passed. Ve'anse ve'Rav Yosef ledevitu. So his wife of chivai came before Rav Yosef, and he released her to go ahead and marry someone else. Is a story about the fellow that used to travel from one place to another, non-Jew. Says, oh, this fellow that was like a Jewish hero. Parash in general is a horse rider, but the idea is that someone who's a well-known hero can be in many different manners. Can be muscles, can be a good man, can be a lot of things. But the idea is, he was talking about that fellow. Oh, I'm so sad that this fellow is gone. And he was talking, not before the court, Ve'ansa Barav Yosef, Ve'itay Marava ledevitu, the same story. So he allowed by this testimony to marry. So the Ran said that that's a proof. The second story, proof for the first one. So because the first circumstance, the Ran said that he said, Man ika bar chivai, where is the fellow? He's not in search of that fellow, bar chivai. He just wants to tell them that he's pet. So that's applied the same manner, it's just a proof. And in general, there is a big discussion among the rabbis how you define Mesiach lefi tumo, because people can pretend Hollywood, pretend that they are just talking naturally and they have a motivation. Ahu nochri, ahu meant what? Idol worshipping. The Avaka Amar Ba'azil Mainika Beichasa Tava Chasa. It's a very similar story. Amar Rav Nachman Elokim Achlu Kavrei Lechasa, which again, that the idea is the past. Mid Diburei de Rav Nachman Az la Devitu de Chasa Veinseba Velo Amrula Velo Midei. The sages did not ask her to divorce the second husband. Amar Rav Ashi Shma Mina, we derive from that. Hadam u Rabbanan, what the sages said. Maim Shen Laim Sov. Remember the first discussion? The sages talk about differentiation between water that you see the end to water that you don't see the end. And so when the sages said, when you're standing there, you see someone, thank God forbid, in the water, and he's in a location that you don't see the end of the water, Ishto Asura, that his wife cannot get married, Hanemile, this decision only lechatchila, which means at the first stage we don't wish to. However, aval inasi, if someone came in and married her just because the rumor that the husband is gone, yet the witnesses only see him sang in the water that is not ended, which is lechatchila, it's not sufficient. But if it's already happened, b'diavad, after the fact, lo mapkinan leiminei, Why? Because we go by this notion that the majority of the people, there are exceptions, but the majority of the people will not survive if it's endless water. Right?
Absolutely.
To say that he's a submarine waiting for him and release him and take him elsewhere, it's so rare that it's inconceivable, at least by the manner of the majority. So therefore, b'diavad, it is accepted. Ika de'amri. There are different versions of that story. Anseva Rav Nachman ledevithu. Rav Nachman married his wife, which means allow her to marry. Amar, Rav Nachman said, even chasa, disappear with the water that is not ended, chasa gavra rabba ite, im ita de salik kala le ita lemita, because he's such a VIP, well-known individual, the word will come out, it will be promulgated. Since not, so they rejected that, said velohi, it's incorrect statement. You know why? Lo shnagav rabba velo shnagav rabba. So it's no difference between a lay person and a very important person. Both, this is the halacha. B'di'avad, after she already married to someone else, you allow her to stay with the second husband. Lechatchila lo. But that lechatchila, the first part, she should not get married. But if it's already happened, it happens and you leave it alone. No. Here is a good example of idolater. Hahu oved kochavim dahava ka'amar le'Yisrael. Again, Mesiach lefi tumo. He was just talking. Right? They're standing in a side road, close to the one of those 7-Eleven, right? The two truck drivers, and they're talking among themselves, wah, 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 from people from the south, right? One said to another, right? Ektol aspasta ushde lechevai b'Shabbat, right? So cut, harvest the fodder and give it to my animal on Shabbat. V'ilo, if you don't do that, right? It's people from Texas. He said, I'm going to kill you like I killed so-and-so the Jew. Why? Because the Amrele, I said to him, Bashelik dera b'Shabbat, I told that Jew, right, come, cook me a pot of food on Shabbat, velo bashili, and he didn't do it for me, he didn't cook for me, vekatilte, guess what I did? I kill him, right? So Shama Devitu, so the daughter of the first man was there. She heard that conversation, right? She must probably serve them in a bar or who knows what, right? She heard the conversation of these guys. And it wasn't in his intent to tell that he killed her, the husband. So she came before the Abaye. And she asked him to allow her to marry. Shaheta. So he deferred the ruling in her case, which means he postponed it, because he wants to search if that's a category of besiach lefi tumo, someone who's just talking naturally or not. 122b, tlata riglei. So you can say that he has an inner voice, or he doesn't feel 100% right to release her, just by saying so. So either you go in the interpretation that they're waiting for the rabbis to get together, which was during the 3 festivals, or there is a version that said that around the grave, like Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, great Rabbonim, you see now yeshiva, portable yeshiva, right, close to Yeratan ben Uziel, the Bedinej saw, right? So there's this place that they're close to the graveside, whatever, that the rabbis get together, and you want to present the case before them, to hear what they said, right? It's not so simple, because she heard a conversation, but Amar le Rav Ada bar Rava, Zile kameh de Rav Yosef. Guess what? He said, go and present it before Rav Yosef. Some said Rava. So anyway, because it's a serious question. The Harif, that his knife is sharp, meaning that it's for sure is euphemism, that he's a sharp mind. As la kamei. So they come and ask him, Pashat meha matnita. So he brought from this following statement of Mishnah, which is the Tosefta Tractate Yevamot chapter 5. עובד כוכבים שהמוכר פירות בשוק. You have an idolater that is selling grocery, he's selling fruits, vegetables in the market. ואמר פירות הללו של אורליים. He said this vegetable is not past the 3 years. And as we know, if it's less than 3 years, is orla. And the Torah said in Leviticus 19, verse 23, that you cannot eat it, or it derive benefit. So this idolater intend to tell people that what? That this is a fresh, people, you ever been in the shuk, you see people shouting. They praise the product, right? So this guy intend to praise his product, that it was, what? A young and fresh from a young tree. And he doesn't know that these fruits cannot be eaten by observant Jews if it's below than 3 years, right? So he said, Shel azzeikain, shel netarevain, lo amar klum. Why? Because you have the assumption of Yosef said that he is lying. ולא נתכוון להשביח מכחו. He may intend it's only to the reputation of his goods, as he thought that his produce will fetch a higher price, as he described it in that fashion. So you see here, Rav Yosef derived from this Braita that in a case of a missing fellow Jew, this fellow statement, the non-Jewish statement, could not be relied upon, because he may state it only to promote his own agenda. So therefore, you stuck, cannot release. Abayudan ish tzaidan amar. Here is a different story. So the different ways that they presented. The Chazon Yechezkel is a book, chapter 14, asks why they present in a certain way. Anyway, Abayudan ish tzaidan amar maaseh b'Yisrael v'oved kochavim shalchu b'derech. Idolater and a fellow Jew went the travel. ובאו עובד כוכבים ואמר חבל על הגיש הימי בדרך שמת בדרך וקברתיו. Says, oh, woe upon this fellow, mention his name, that he was traveling with me and he passed and I buried him. Right? V'isiu ishto. So the sages said, since he was talking in a natural manner, mesiach lefi tumo, and he pointed out where it was the location that they left, etc. ושוב מעשה בקולר של בני אדם שהיו מלכים לאנטוכיה. So here's a story. According to Rambam, was a minion, was 10 men that traveled from one location to another. So it's a difference between Rambam and Rashi, what is kolar. But anyway, הוא בא עובד כוכבים אחד ואמר, חבל על קולר של בני אדם. He said, woe upon this kolar of the people. So either it's a loud chain or it's a ring, like placed around the neck of an animal or prisoner. So that's the idea. So he said, "Whoa, shemetu kvartim, the bury and the pass and I bury, v'esiu et neshotehem." So again, another story that they allow the wives to get married. ושוב מעשה ב-60 בני אדם שהיו מלכים לקרקום ביתר, 60 people who went to that place. קרקום ביתר, it's a north city of Israel that today it's in Turkey. ובא עובד כוכבים ואמר, as a idolater came and said, חבל 60 בני אדם שהיו מלכים בדרך, ביתר שמתו וקברתיו. Woe upon the 60 people that were walking on the road to Beitar, for they died and I buried them. והסיעו את נשותיהם, and the sages allow the wives to marry. So you see here that it's a combination of two signs, the amount of people and their destination. So you bring these three examples because in each of them it's an innovating point of view. You see, the key is how far the sages go in order to release the broken-hearted, deserted woman. For the first one, that the non-Jew said that the fellow Jew will walk with me even if I never know him, so it may be someone else. You see that they go and said fine. The second one with the story of the collar, that chain, that if they all die, so people need to hear about it. Yet the rabbi said fine, we allow. Or the third case of 60 men, so for sure you need to hear about it or something. Also, they accepted that just to release those wives. That's the Rosh in his responsa. Another book called Aruch Laner, he has a different avenue why they bring each story independently and what's the meaning. But they wrap it up. The key idea is that when it's come to release a deserted wife, the rabbis go extremely lenient.
ויחם לשולוים מלאכי השולוים מלאכי